know that feeling when someone close to you makes a huge life decision and you're the last one to find out? Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me. And honestly, I still can't believe it. My grandson got married without telling me, without inviting me, without even a heads up. I found out the day after it happened. Let me tell you how this all went down because it's been eating at me ever since. And trust me, this story gets worse before it gets better. Actually, it doesn't get better at all. So, I'm Nanny. That's what everyone calls me. Has been my name for the past 47 years, ever since my first grandchild was born. I'm 71 years old now, and I've lived through more than most people could imagine. I raised 4 children on my own after my husband passed away when I was just 42. Heart attack. One day he was here, laughing at the dinner table, talking about his plans to build a new shed in the backyard. The next day he was gone, just like that. No warning, no goodbye, nothing. I had 4 kids to feed. 4 kids who needed clothes and school supplies and food and a roof over their heads. I had a mortgage to pay, bills stacking up on the counter, and no life insurance because we could never afford it. We were always one emergency away from disaster, and that emergency came in the form of my husband's sudden death. I worked as a seamstress during the day, hunched over a sewing machine in a cramped factory where the air was thick with lint and the fluorescent lights gave everyone headaches. My fingers would cramp up from the repetitive motions. My back would ache from sitting in the same position for 8 hours straight. But I kept going because I had to. At night, after I fed my kids dinner and helped them with homework and tucked them into bed, I'd head out to clean offices downtown. I'd scrub toilets and vacuum floors and empty trash cans while the city slept. I'd get home around 2 in the morning, sleep for 3 hours, then wake up and do it all over again. I did what I had to do to keep my family together. And we survived. We more than survived. We built something together. My kids grew up knowing what hard work looked like. They grew up understanding that family takes care of family. They grew up with values and love and a mother who would have done anything for them. My oldest son, Michael, was the one who really stepped up after his father died. He was only 14 years old, just a boy himself, but he became the man of the house overnight. He helped with his younger siblings, breaking up their fights, helping them with homework, making sure they got to school on time. He got a paper route to bring in extra money, waking up at 5 in the morning to deliver newspapers in the freezing cold or pouring rain. He never complained, not once. He just did what needed to be done. Michael grew up to be an incredible man. He got a scholarship to community college, worked his way through school, got a good job in IT, and married a wonderful woman named Jennifer. And when Michael had his own son, my precious grandson, Tommy, I was over the moon. Finally, something good, something pure and beautiful in a life that had been so hard for so long. I was there the day Tommy was born. I was in the hospital waiting room when Michael came out with tears streaming down his face, telling me I had a grandson. I held Tommy minutes after he came into this world. He was so tiny, so perfect. His little fingers wrapped around mine, and I swear I felt my heart grow 3 sizes, just like in that Christmas movie. I looked down at this baby, and I promised him right then and there that I would always be there for him, that I would love him unconditionally, that I would be his nanny forever and ever, no matter what. And I kept that promise. Boy, did I keep that promise. When Michael and Jennifer both had to work, and they did because one income wasn't enough to survive on anymore, I watched Tommy. every single day for the first 5 years of his life. I'd get up early, get dressed, and drive to their house before they left for work. I changed his diapers, hundreds and hundreds of them. I fed him his bottles, burped him, rocked him to sleep. I taught him to walk, holding his little hands as he took those wobbly first steps across my living room floor. I was there for his first words. Nanny was actually his second word, right after Mama. I was there for his first laugh, this beautiful sound that made all the exhaustion and hard work worth it. I was there for his first everything. When Tommy started kindergarten, I was the one who picked him up every single day. I'd wait in the pickup line, watching for his little face to appear in the doorway of the school. He'd see my car and his whole face would light up. He'd run to me, backpack bouncing, and climb into the car full of stories about his day. We'd drive to my house, and I'd make him snacks. Peanut butter crackers, apple slices, cheese and crackers, whatever he wanted. We'd sit at my kitchen table, and I'd help him with his homework. Math problems that seemed so simple but were so challenging for a 5-year-old. Reading assignments where he'd sound out words slowly and carefully. Art projects that required glue and scissors and patience. I listened to him talk about his day, really listened. About his friends and the games they played at recess, about the things he learned in class, about the boy who pushed him on the playground and the teacher who made them apologize to each other, about his dreams and his fears and all the little things that seem so important to a child. I never brushed him off or told him I was too busy. I gave him my full attention because that's what he deserved. I went to every school play, every single one, even the ones where he just stood in the back as a tree or a shepherd. I'd sit in those uncomfortable auditorium seats and watch with pride as my grandson performed. I went to every sports game, even though I knew nothing about soccer or basketball or baseball. I'd cheer louder than anyone else in the stands. I went to every parent-teacher conference right alongside Michael and Jennifer. I wanted to know how Tommy was doing. I wanted to be involved in every aspect of his life. I wasn't just his grandmother. I was one of his primary caregivers. I was his person, the person he ran to when he was upset, the person he wanted when he was sick, the person he trusted with everything. Tommy and I had a special bond. Everyone said so. Michael would joke that Tommy loved me more than he loved his own parents. Jennifer would smile and say she was grateful Tommy had me in his life. Other family members would comment on how close we were, how Tommy's face lit up whenever I walked into a room. On weekends, he'd beg to stay at my house. He'd pack his little backpack with pajamas and his favorite stuffed animal, this worn-out teddy bear he had since he was a baby. We'd have sleepovers that felt magical to him. We'd bake cookies together, chocolate chip ones that we'd eat warm from the oven, even though they burned our mouths a little. We'd watch old movies, classic Disney films that I'd loved as a child and now got to share with him. We'd work on puzzles that took us weeks to finish, big 1,000-piece ones spread out on my dining room table. Every day he came over, we'd add a few more pieces, slowly watching the picture come together. He'd tell me secrets he wouldn't tell anyone else. About the girl he had a crush on in second grade, about how he was scared of the dark but didn't want to tell his parents because he wanted to be brave, about how sometimes he worried about things that most kids his age didn't worry about, like money and whether his parents were happy. I'd listen and comfort him and tell him everything was going to be okay. When he had nightmares, he'd call me. Didn't matter if it was 3 in the morning. The phone would ring and I'd answer it, my heart racing because a phone call at that hour is never good news. But it would be Tommy, crying, saying he had a bad dream and couldn't go back to sleep. I'd talk to him for however long it took, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes an hour. I'd tell him stories or sing him songs or just talk about nothing until I could hear his breathing slow down and even out, until he felt safe enough to go back to sleep. As Tommy got older, our bond only grew stronger. Some people say that kids drift away from their grandparents as they become teenagers, that they're too cool to hang out with old people anymore, but not Tommy, not my Tommy. When he was a teenager and fighting with his parents like all teenagers do, fighting about curfews and grades and why he couldn't do certain things, he'd come to my house to cool off. He'd show up at my door angry and frustrated, and I'd let him in without questions. I'd make him tea, the kind with honey that he loved since he was little. We'd sit on my porch in the rocking chairs, looking out at the street, and we'd talk, really talk, about life and growing up and how hard it is to figure out who you are, about his feelings and his struggles and his dreams for the future. I never judged him. I never told him he was being dramatic or silly. I just listened and loved him and let him know that no matter what, he had a safe place with me. He'd tell me things he couldn't tell his parents, about the pressure he felt to do well in school, about the girl who broke his heart in 10th grade, about his fears that he wouldn't get into a good college, about his worries about the future and what he wanted to do with his life. I'd give him advice when he asked for it, but mostly I just listened. Sometimes that's all people need, someone to listen without judgment. When Tommy went to college, I was so proud I thought my heart might burst. He got accepted to a good school about 2 hours away. Not too far, but far enough that he'd be on his own, learning to be independent. The day we dropped him off at his dorm, I helped him unpack. I made his bed with the sheets I'd bought him, blue ones, because blue had always been his favorite color. I stocked his mini fridge with snacks and drinks. I arranged his textbooks on his desk. And when it was time to leave, when Michael and Jennifer were already in the car waiting, I hugged him tight and told him I was so proud of him. He hugged me back just as tight and whispered, "I love you, Nanny," in my ear. He called me twice a week during college, like clockwork, Tuesday and Saturday mornings. He had an early class on Tuesday and would call me on his walk across campus. Saturday mornings, he'd sleep in, then call me over his breakfast. We'd talk for an hour or more. He'd tell me about his classes, about the professors he loved and the ones he couldn't stand, about his roommates and their quirks, like the guy who never did laundry and the one who studied until 3 in the morning with music blasting, about his struggles with certain subjects and his victories when he aced an exam he'd been worried about. I'd tell him about what was happening back home, about what was happening in the neighborhood, like old Mrs. Henderson getting a new cat, or the Johnsons finally painting their house after 20 years, about the garden I was tending, the tomatoes I was growing, and the flowers that were blooming, about my daily life, the small things that maybe weren't interesting to anyone else but mattered to us. Those calls were the highlight of my weeks. I'd sit in my favorite chair with my tea and my phone and just soak in the sound of his voice. I'd laugh at his stories and offer comfort when things were hard. I'd tell him I loved him at the end of every call, and he'd always say it back. 4 years of college, and we never missed our Tuesday and Saturday calls. Not once. Even when he was sick or stressed or busy, he made time for me.
Even during finals week, when he was drowning in papers and exams, he'd call even if it was just for 10 minutes. That's how I knew he loved me. That's how I knew I mattered to him. Then Tommy met Vanessa.
At first, I was excited. Tommy was 24 years old and he'd never had a serious girlfriend. Sure, he'd dated here and there in high school and college, but nothing that lasted more than a few months. He was always so focused on his studies, on making something of himself, on building a good future. When he called me all excited one Tuesday morning, talking about this girl he met at a friend's party, I was thrilled. My sweet boy was in love. Finally, he'd found someone who made him happy. He talked about her for an hour, about how beautiful she was, how smart, how successful. She worked in marketing for some big company in the city, making more money than Tommy could even imagine. She came from a good family, he said, a really good family. Her dad was some kind of executive, and her mom didn't work because she didn't have to. They lived in a big house in the nicest part of town. They took vacations to Europe and the Caribbean. They were the kind of people Tommy had never been around before. I should have seen the warning signs then. I should have heard the way he talked about her family's money, with this tone of awe and maybe a little bit of shame about his own background. I should have noticed that he spent more time talking about what she had than who she was. But I didn't. I was just happy he was happy. The first time I met Vanessa was at a family barbecue at Michael's house. It was a beautiful summer day. Warm, but not too hot. Perfect weather for an outdoor gathering. Michael and Jennifer had invited the whole family. My other kids and their families, some cousins, close friends. It was the kind of gathering we'd been having for years. Casual, fun, full of love and laughter. Tommy told me Vanessa was coming, and I was so excited to finally meet her. I'd heard so much about her over the past few weeks. I got there early to help set up, like I always did. I made my famous potato salad, the one everyone always raved about. The recipe had been my mother's, passed down to me, and I'd been making it for decades. I also made a dessert, my chocolate cake, that Tommy had loved since he was a little boy. Vanessa showed up late. Almost an hour late. Everyone else had already arrived and we were starting to eat when she finally pulled up in her expensive car. She stepped out dressed like she was going to a cocktail party instead of a backyard cookout. Designer everything. A dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Heels that were completely impractical for grass. Sunglasses that definitely cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She had this way of looking at people, this way of scanning them up and down like she was sizing them up, deciding if they were worth her time. I watched her do it to Michael and Jennifer, to my other kids, to everyone at the party. Her expression never changed, just this polite, distant smile that never reached her eyes. I tried to be welcoming. I really did. I was determined to make a good first impression, to show her that Tommy came from a good family, even if we didn't have money like hers. I went right up to her with my arms open, ready to give her a big hug. I told her how excited I was to finally meet her, how much I'd heard about her, how happy I was that she made Tommy so happy. She kind of stiffened in my arms, like hugging me was uncomfortable for her. She gave me this weak pat on the back, the kind of pat you give when you're trying to end a hug as quickly as possible. When I pulled away, she was smiling, but it was so fake. It was the kind of smile you give someone when you're being polite, but you'd rather be anywhere else in the world. I tried not to let it bother me. Maybe she was just nervous. Meeting your boyfriend's family for the first time is nerve-wracking. I understood that. So I pressed on, determined to make her feel welcome. I asked her about herself, where she was from, what she did for work, how she and Tommy met. Basic questions, friendly questions. She gave short answers, barely making eye contact with me. She kept checking her phone, scrolling through something, clearly not fully present in the conversation. She kept looking around like she was searching for an escape route, for someone more interesting to talk. I asked if she wanted something to eat. There was so much food laid out on the table. Burgers and hot dogs fresh off the grill. All kinds of salads and sides. My potato salad that everyone loved. She glanced at the table and kind of wrinkled her nose. She said she was on a special diet and couldn't eat anything there. Didn't even ask what was in anything. Didn't even try a bite. Just dismissed everything we'd spent hours preparing. Tommy was so attentive to her all day. It was almost painful to watch. He barely left her side, constantly asking if she needed anything, if she was okay, if she was having fun. He barely talked to anyone else. His cousins he hadn't seen in months tried to chat with him, and he'd give them maybe 2 minutes before Vanessa would pull him away. At one point, I was in the middle of telling Tommy about my neighbor's new puppy. It was a sweet story, nothing important, just small talk. I was maybe 30 seconds into the story when Vanessa grabbed his arm and said they needed to go say hi to someone. She didn't even acknowledge that I was mid-sentence, just grabbed him and pulled him away. They walked off and I was left standing there alone, my story unfinished, feeling like I'd been dismissed, like I was nothing. I watched them throughout the day, watched how Vanessa would whisper things in Tommy's ear and he'd immediately jump to do whatever she wanted. Watched how she barely interacted with anyone, spending most of the time on her phone. Watched how she looked at our simple backyard gathering with this expression of mild disgust, like she was too good for all of this. When they left, Tommy gave me a quick hug and said he'd call me soon. Vanessa didn't even say goodbye to me, just got in a car and waited for Tommy. As they drove away, I felt this sinking feeling in my stomach, this sense that something was wrong, that this woman was going to be a problem. But I pushed it away. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself to give her a chance. I told myself that Tommy loved her, and that was all that mattered. After that barbecue, things started to change. Slowly at first. So slowly I almost didn't notice. Then faster than I could process. Tommy's Tuesday and Saturday calls became less frequent. The first time he missed a Tuesday, he called me that evening apologizing. He said he'd been busy with a project at work and forgot. Forgot. In 4 years of college and a year after graduation, he'd never forgotten our calls. But okay, people get busy. I understood. Then he missed a Saturday, then another Tuesday, then both days in 1 week. When I'd call him instead of waiting for him to call me, he'd answer but sound distracted. I could hear Vanessa in the background sometimes talking about places they needed to go, things they needed to do, people they needed to see. Her voice was always there, always pulling his attention away from me. Our hour-long conversations turned into 20-minute check-ins, then 15 minutes, then 10, then 5, until finally they were just quick, "Hey, I'm good. How are you? Gotta go." Calls that felt more like obligations than genuine connection. I told myself it was normal. He was in a relationship. Young people need time with their partners. I didn't want to be that clingy grandmother who couldn't let go. So I gave him space. I waited for him to call me instead of always calling him. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to be the needy old woman who couldn't accept that her grandson was growing up and building his own life. But giving space turned into being forgotten. And I was too proud or too scared to say anything about it. I'd sit by my phone on Tuesday mornings, waiting for it to ring. It wouldn't. Saturday mornings came and went with silence. I'd tell myself he was busy, that he'd call later, that everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. I could feel him slipping away from me, and I didn't know how to stop it. Holidays became painful in a way I never experienced before. We always spent holidays together as a family. Always. That was our thing, our tradition. My house was the gathering place. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, 4th of July, even the smaller holidays like Memorial Day and Labor Day. Everyone came to Nanny's house. I'd cook for days leading up to Thanksgiving, getting everything perfect. The turkey, which I'd brine overnight and roast until the skin was golden and crispy. The ham, glazed with brown sugar and pineapple. The pies, apple and pumpkin and pecan, made from scratch, with crusts that were flaky and perfect. All the side dishes everyone loved. Mashed potatoes with real butter and cream. Green bean casserole with those crispy onions on top. Stuffing made from my grandmother's recipe. Sweet potato casserole with marshmallows that the kids always fought over. Cranberry sauce, both the canned kind and the homemade kind, because people had preferences. My house would be full of laughter and love and family. Kids running around, adults catching up, the TV playing football games that the men half watched while they talked, the smell of food filling every room, the sound of happiness and togetherness. But that first Thanksgiving after Tommy met Vanessa, everything changed. He called me the day before Thanksgiving. The day before. I was in my kitchen, up to my elbows in pie dough, when my phone rang. I answered it excited, thinking maybe he was calling to ask if he could bring anything or to confirm what time to arrive. Instead, he told me he wasn't coming. He said Vanessa's family invited him to their Thanksgiving dinner. He said it was really important to her that he be there. He said it was a big deal to meet her extended family. He said he hoped I understood. I stood there in my kitchen, flour on my hands, listening to my grandson tell me he wasn't coming to Thanksgiving. For the first time in 24 years, Tommy wouldn't be at my table. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. I couldn't breathe for a second. What was I supposed to say? No, you can't go. You have to come to my house? I'm not that kind of person. I would never manipulate him or make him feel guilty. So I said, of course I understood. I said, have a wonderful time. I said, give Vanessa's family my regards. I said I loved him. He said he loved me too and that he'd take me soon. Then he hung up. I stood there holding my phone for I don't know how long. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and cried. I cried because my table would feel empty without him. I cried because for 24 years he'd been at my Thanksgiving table and now he wasn't. I cried because I knew things were changing and I couldn't stop it. I cried because I felt like I was losing him and there was nothing I could do about it. Thanksgiving Day came and my house was full, like always. My other kids and their families, everyone except Tommy. People kept asking where he was. I had to explain over and over that he was at his girlfriend's family's dinner. Everyone understood, but I could see it in their eyes, the pity, the concern. They knew this was the beginning of something, even if they didn't say it out loud. I set his place at the table anyway, put out a plate and silverware like I always did, Like maybe if I said it, he'd show up? He didn't. That empty place setting mocked me all through dinner. Christmas was even worse. I'd been up since 5 in the morning on Christmas Day, cooking his favorite breakfast, like I'd done every Christmas morning since he was 5. Cinnamon rolls from scratch, the kind that take hours to make because you have to let the dough rise twice. I'd roll them out, spread them with butter and cinnamon and brown sugar, roll them up and cut them into perfect spirals. I'd let them rise again before baking them until they were golden and perfect. Then I drizzled them with cream cheese frosting while they were still warm. The smell filled my house, that sweet cinnamon smell that meant Christmas morning. I set the table for breakfast, put out the good plates, made coffee and hot chocolate. I waited. Tommy showed up at 9:30, an hour and a half after I'd told him breakfast would be ready. The cinnamon rolls were cold by then. He came in alone. Vanessa stayed in the car. He said she wasn't feeling well. He said they couldn't stay long because they had to get to her parents' house for Christmas brunch. He handed me a gift card to a department store, not wrapped, just the card and the little envelope it came in. He gave me a quick hug that lasted maybe 3 seconds. I tried to get him to sit down, to have some breakfast, to spend just a little time with me. He glanced at the table, at the spread I'd prepared, and said he already ate. Already ate. On Christmas morning. Without me. He said Merry Christmas, said he loved me, said he had to go, and then he was gone. The whole visit lasted maybe 10 minutes. I watched from my window as he got back in the car. Vanessa didn't even look at my house. She was on her phone, scrolling through something, completely uninterested in where her boyfriend had just been. They drove away, and I stood there holding a gift card, looking at the breakfast I'd made that no one would eat, feeling more alone than I'd felt in years, more alone than I'd felt even after my husband died. Because at least then I had my kids. I had Tommy. Now I didn't even have that. I sat down at my table and ate a cinnamon roll by myself. It was cold and it tasted like sadness. The months after that Christmas were a blur of disappointment and loneliness. I started seeing less and less of Tommy. Months would go by without a visit. I'd call and he'd promise to come see me soon. Soon never came. It was always next weekend or the weekend after or next month. Always some excuse. Work was busy. They had plans with Vanessa's friends. Vanessa wasn't feeling well. They were going out of town. I'd text him asking how he was doing. He'd respond hours later with short messages. Good. Busy. Talk soon. That was it. The boy who used to tell me everything was now giving me nothing. The boy who used to call me twice a week to talk for hours now couldn't even manage a real text conversation. I tried not to be bitter. I tried to understand, but it was hard, so hard. I'd sit in my house alone, looking at pictures of Tommy as a baby, as a little boy, as a teenager, and I'd wonder where it all went wrong. I'd wonder what I did to make him pull away. I'd wonder if I was too clingy, too needy, too old, too boring. I'd wonder if Vanessa said something to him about me. I'd wonder if he was embarrassed of me, of my small house, of my simple life, of my lack of money. Then Michael called me one day with news. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my garden pulling weeds when my phone rang. Michael's voice was excited, but also a little concerned. He said Tommy was engaged. He proposed to Vanessa over some fancy weekend trip to wine country. I should have been happy. I should have been excited. But all I felt was dread. Because I knew what this meant. It meant Vanessa was going to be a permanent part of Tommy's life. It meant she'd have even more influence over him.
It meant I was going to lose him completely. Michael sounded happy, but I could hear the concern in his voice, too. He said Tommy seemed different lately, more distant, more focused on impressing Vanessa and her family. He said he tried to talk to Tommy about it, but Tommy brushed him off, said everything was fine. Michael said he was trying to be supportive because that's what parents do. I told him I was happy for Tommy. I lied. I called Tommy immediately to congratulate him. I wanted to hear it from him. I wanted him to be excited to tell me. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. He sounded out of breath, like he'd been running. He said, "Hey, Nanny," sounding surprised that I was calling, like I was the last person he expected to hear from. I said I heard the news. There was a pause. Then he said, "Oh, yeah," and launched into this explanation of how he proposed. He talked fast, describing the weekend trip, the fancy vineyard, the sunset proposal, how we got down on one knee. He sounded excited but also rushed, like he had somewhere else to be. I congratulated him, told him I was so happy for him, asked to hear more about it. He gave me the basic details, but kept it short. Said they were thinking about getting married next year, said they wanted something small, intimate, just close family and friends. That phrase, close family, felt like a knife. Was I close family anymore? Based on the last several months, I wasn't so sure.
I asked if I could help with planning, maybe go dress shopping with Vanessa, help with invitations, anything. Normal grandmother stuff. Things I'd been looking forward to since Tommy was born. Being part of his wedding planning, helping in whatever way I could. He said that was sweet. Sweet. Like I was some neighbor offering to help, not my grandmother who'd raised him. He said Vanessa's mom was already helping with all that. He said they had it covered. He said there wasn't really anything for me to do, but he'd let me know if that changed. That stung. It stung so bad I had to sit down. I felt rejected, unnecessary, replaced. But again, I told myself to be understanding. Emma was closer to her mom. That's natural. They probably had a good relationship. Her mom probably knew about wedding planning, about venues and flowers and all that stuff I knew nothing about. I didn't want to intrude. I didn't want to be pushy. So I said okay. I said I was excited to see whatever they decided. I said I loved him. We hung up. I sat in my living room for a long time after that call. I felt this overwhelming sadness wash over me. I was being excluded from one of the most important events in my grandson's life, and there was nothing I could do about it. I couldn't force him to include me. I couldn't make him want me there. All I could do was accept it and try not to let it destroy me. Months went by, and I heard nothing about wedding plans. Whenever I asked Tommy about it, he'd give vague answers. "We're still figuring things out. It's coming together. I'll let you know when we have details." Always vague. Always putting me off. Never including me. I'd ask Michael if he knew anything. He'd shrug and say Tommy wasn't talking much about it. I'd ask Jennifer, and she'd say the same thing. We were all being kept in the dark. Even Tommy's parents didn't know what was happening. That should have made me feel better, like it wasn't just me being excluded. But it didn't. It just made me realize that Vanessa had completely taken over Tommy's life, and he was letting her. Then, one day, about 6 months after the engagement, something happened that made everything so much worse. I was at the grocery store doing my weekly shopping. It was a Thursday afternoon, my usual time to go because the store wasn't too crowded then. I was pushing my cart slowly through the aisles. My arthritis had been acting up worse than usual, and everything took longer than it used to. My knees hurt, my hands hurt, even my shoulders hurt from reaching for things on high shelves. I was in the produce section, trying to decide which apples looked best, when I heard someone call my name. I turned around and saw one of Vanessa's aunts. I'd met her once at another family gathering, some birthday party for Vanessa's cousin. She was nice enough, friendly, chatty, one of those people who talks to everyone and never seems to meet a stranger. She came right over, all excited, her cart banging into mine. She said how good it was to see me, how long it had been. Then she started talking about the wedding. She was so excited, talking about how beautiful everything was going to be. My stomach dropped, but I kept smiling, nodding along. She talked about the venue, some fancy country club with marble floors and crystal chandeliers and a view of the lake. She talked about the date they'd chosen, a Saturday in June, the 23rd. She talked about the flowers Vanessa chose, white roses and peonies, arrangements that would be on every table. She talked about the string quartet they hired for the ceremony. She talked about the menu for the reception, a 4-course meal that sounded more expensive than anything I'd ever eaten.
She went on and on for at least 10 minutes, describing the color scheme, navy and gold, describing Vanessa's dress, which apparently cost more than some people's cars, describing the cake, 5 tiers covered in fondant flowers, every detail. She knew them all. I knew none of it. Not a single thing. My grandson hadn't told me any of this. Not the venue, not the date, not the colors, nothing. I stood there in the produce section of the grocery store, holding a bag of apples, smiling and nodding, pretending I knew what she was talking about, pretending I was in the loop, pretending my heart wasn't breaking with every word she said. When she finally finished talking and went on her way, I abandoned my cart right there in the aisle and walked out of the store. I got in my car and just sat there in the parking lot. I couldn't drive. I couldn't think. I couldn't process what had just happened. A stranger, basically. Vanessa's aunt, who I'd met once for maybe 20 minutes. She knew more about my grandson's wedding than I did. She knew details that I should have known, details that should have been shared with me weeks or months ago. And instead, I was finding them out from her in the grocery store while I was shopping for apples. When I got home, I didn't even bring the groceries in. I'd left them in the abandoned cart. I just went inside, sat down in my rocking chair, and called Tommy. He didn't answer. I called again. No answer. I called a third time. Finally, on the 4th call, he picked up. He sounded annoyed. "Hey, Nanny, I'm kind of busy right now." Busy. Too busy for his grandmother. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I was hurt and angry and confused. I asked him about the wedding plans. Why hadn't he told me anything? Why was I finding out details from Vanessa's aunt in the grocery store? Why was I the last person to know what was happening? He got defensive immediately. His tone changed from annoyed to angry. He said he'd been meaning to call me. He said things had been crazy busy. He said Vanessa's mom was handling most of it and he'd been swamped with work. He said he didn't want to bother me with all the details because he knew I had enough going on. Bother me? Planning my grandson's wedding would bother me? The grandson I raised? The boy I took care of every single day for years? The child I sacrificed for? I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I kept my voice as calm as I could and asked him about the date. He confirmed it. June 23rd. I asked about the venue. He told me the name of the country club. I asked if I could see it, maybe help with anything at all. He said they had it under control. He said Vanessa's mom had everything organized. He said they'd send me the invitation soon so I'd have all the information. An invitation? I'd need an invitation to know about my own grandson's wedding? Like I was just another guest. Not his nanny. Not the woman who raised him. Just another name on a list that needed a formal invitation. I asked if we could have lunch. Just the two of us. I needed to talk to him face to face. I needed to see him and understand what was happening. I needed to know if he even cared about me anymore. He said he'd check his schedule and get back to me. Check his schedule? To have lunch with his own grandson? We hung up and I sat there feeling like my world was falling apart. This boy who I'd given everything to couldn't even make time for a simple lunch with me. Couldn't even tell me basic information about his wedding. Couldn't even pretend to care that I was being left out. Days went by. A week. 2 weeks. No call about lunch. No text. Nothing. I tried calling him again. He didn't answer. I left a message. He didn't call back. I sent him a text asking if he was okay. He responded 12 hours later with just, "I'm fine." I felt like I was going crazy, like I was losing my mind. This person who used to be my whole world, who used to call me twice a week and visit me and tell me everything, was now a stranger. And I didn't understand why. What had I done wrong? Why was he pushing me away? Why was Vanessa more important than me? Why was her family more important than his own? 3 weeks after that phone call, the formal invitation arrived in my mailbox. I saw it there, this thick cream-colored envelope with fancy calligraphy. For a second, I was excited. My grandson's wedding invitation. But when I opened it and read it, that excitement turned to dust. Heavy cardstock. Expensive. Probably cost more per invitation than I spent on groceries in a week. My name printed in that fancy calligraphy, Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, +1. I didn't have a +1. My husband died 29 years ago. I'd been alone ever since. I dated a little bit over the years, but nothing serious. Nothing that lasted. I was alone. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was how impersonal it felt. How cold. It was beautiful, sure. Elegant. Expensive. But it felt like something you'd send to a distant cousin or a coworker you felt obligated to invite. Not something you'd send to your grandmother. Not something you'd send to someone who'd been there for you your entire life. There was no personal note. No handwritten message saying he loved me or that he was excited for me to be there. Just the printed invitation with all the details. The date, the time, the place. RSVP by this date. Dress code. Formal. That was it.
I held that invitation in my hands and I cried. Again, I seem to be crying a lot these days. Crying over a boy who didn't seem to care about me anymore. I called Tommy when I got the invitation. I needed to talk to him. Really talk to him. I needed to have a real conversation about what was happening between us, about how hurt I was, about how excluded I felt, about how much I missed him. He answered on the fifth ring. He sounded distracted, like he was doing something else while talking to me. I told him I got the invitation. He said good, like he was checking something off a list. I tried to explain how I was feeling. I tried to tell him that I felt left out, that I wanted to be more involved, that I missed him, that I was hurt by how distant he had become. He sighed. That's what hurt the most. He sighed like I was being difficult, like I was asking for too much, like I was some burden he had to deal with. He said Emma's family was very traditional. He said they had certain expectations about how weddings should be planned and executed. He said it was easier to just let Emma's mom handle everything because she knew what she was doing and had experience with this kind of thing. He said he didn't want to stress me out with wedding stuff because he knew I was busy with my own life. He thought I'd be happy to not have to worry about the details.
Every excuse in the book, every reason why excluding me was actually good for me. Never once did he acknowledge how I felt. Never once did he say he was sorry for hurting me. Never once did he validate my feelings or admit that maybe he'd handled things wrong. I tried again. I said I didn't care about being stressed. I said I wanted to be involved because I loved him, and this was important. I said I felt like I was losing him, and I didn't understand why. My voice cracked when I said it. I was on the verge of crying, and I didn't want to cry on the phone with him, but I couldn't help it. He got quiet for a moment. Then he said I was being unfair. He said I was making his wedding about me when it should be about him and Vanessa. He said I needed to respect their choices and be happy for them. He said they were adults, making their own decisions, and I needed to accept that. Respect their choices. Be happy for them. Accept it. Like my feelings didn't matter. Like the fact that I was being erased from his life was just something I needed to get over. I asked if we could have lunch. Please, just one lunch before the wedding. Just an hour or two where we could sit together and talk, where maybe we could reconnect, where maybe he could explain things to me in person instead of over the phone, where it was so easy to misunderstand each other. He said he'd check his schedule and get back to me. The same thing he'd said weeks ago. I knew what that meant. It meant no. It meant he didn't want to see me. It meant he was done with this conversation and done with me. We hung up, and I sat in my house in complete silence. I felt numb, empty, like everything inside me had been scooped out and there was nothing left. Weeks went by. No lunch, no call, nothing. I'd see posts on Facebook sometimes. Tommy and Vanessa at some restaurant. Tommy and Vanessa at Vanessa's parents' house. Tommy and Vanessa on a weekend trip. He had time for all of that. Time for everyone and everything except me. I stopped calling him. I stopped texting. I figured if he wanted to talk to me, he knew where I was. He knew my number. He knew I was always available for him. But my phone stayed silent. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into a month. Nothing. Michael noticed. He called me one day and asked if everything was okay between me and Tommy.
I didn't want to burden Michael with this. He was Tommy's father. He was caught in the middle. So I said everything was fine. Just busy, you know how it is. Michael didn't believe me, but he didn't push. Jennifer called me too. She'd always been sweet to me. She said she'd noticed Tommy had been distant with everyone, not just me. She said she was worried about him. She said he seemed different since he met Vanessa, more focused on money and status, less focused on family. She said she tried to talk to him about it, but he got defensive. She said maybe after the wedding things would settle down and he'd go back to normal. I wanted to believe her, but I didn't. The weeks leading up to the wedding were torture. I'd think about it constantly, about what I'd wear, about what I'd say to people, about whether Tommy would even talk to me at his own wedding, about whether I'd just be there in body, but not in spirit, watching from the sidelines as my grandson celebrated with people who actually mattered to him. I bought a dress for the wedding. It took me 3 trips to 3 different stores before I found one that felt right. Something nice, but not too flashy. I didn't want to stand out. I didn't want to embarrass Tommy. Something that made me feel put together, even though I felt like I was falling apart inside. The dress was navy blue, since that was one of the wedding colors. It had sleeves to cover my arms that had gotten saggy with age. It hit just below my knees. It was simple and elegant and appropriate. I had it altered to fit perfectly, even though alterations cost extra money I didn't really have to spare. I bought new shoes, even though my feet hurt in anything but my old comfortable sneakers. Black heels with a small heel, nothing too high because I didn't want to risk falling. I wanted to look good. I wanted Tommy to be proud of me. I wanted to fit in with Vanessa's fancy family, even though I knew I never would. 2 weeks before the wedding, I texted Tommy asking about details. What time should I arrive? Was there a rehearsal dinner? Was I invited to that? Did he need anything from me? Was there anything at all I could do to help?
He responded 6 hours later with just the time and address of the venue. Nothing else. No answers to my other questions, no warmth, no love, just information, like I was some random guest who needed directions. I tried not to read too much into it. Maybe he was just busy. Wedding planning was stressful. Maybe he was overwhelmed and didn't have time for long conversations. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, even though doubt was all I had. 1 week before the wedding, I started feeling anxious, really anxious, like something was wrong, something was off. I couldn't explain it, just this feeling in my gut, this instinct that had kept me alive and functioning through all the hard times in my life. That feeling was screaming at me that something bad was coming. I tried calling Tommy. No answer. I tried texting. No response. I called Michael and asked if he'd heard from Tommy. He said they talked a few days ago about some last-minute details for the rehearsal dinner. The rehearsal dinner that apparently I wasn't invited to. Michael seemed uncomfortable when I asked about it. He said it was just immediate family and the wedding party. I was immediate family, but apparently not immediate enough. 5 days before the wedding, I still hadn't heard from Tommy. I sent him a text saying I was excited for the big day and I loved him. I stared at my phone for an hour waiting for a response. When it finally came, it was just one word: thanks.
Not, I love you too. Not, can't wait to see you. Just, thanks. Like I was some acquaintance wishing him well, not his grandmother who devoted years of her life to raising him. 3 days before the wedding, the anxiety got worse. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, just paced around my house feeling like something terrible was about to happen. I tried to distract myself. I worked in my garden, pulling weeds that didn't need pulling. I cleaned my house even though it was already clean. I baked cookies that nobody would eat. Nothing helped. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep at all. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, that anxious feeling getting stronger with every hour that passed. At around 10 o'clock, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to hear Tommy's voice. I had to know that everything was okay. I had to have some kind of reassurance that tomorrow would be fine and I was worrying for nothing. I picked up my phone and called him. My hands were shaking. I almost hung up before it started ringing, but I forced myself to wait. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I was about to hang up, to tell myself he was probably asleep and I shouldn't have called so late. Then someone answered. But it wasn't Tommy. It was Vanessa. Her voice was cold, flat, like she'd been expecting my call and was annoyed by it. She said Tommy couldn't come to the phone, just like that. No explanation, no he's in the shower or he's busy with something. Just couldn't come to the phone. I asked if everything was okay for tomorrow, if there was anything I needed to know, any last-minute changes. I was grasping for reasons to keep her on the phone, grasping for any information at all. There was a long pause, so long I thought maybe the call had dropped. I pulled my phone away from my ear to check if we were still connected. We were. Then she spoke. We got married yesterday.
I didn't understand at first. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. I actually laughed because I thought maybe I'd misheard her. Maybe she said something else and my old ears got it wrong. Maybe she said they were getting married tomorrow, reminding me of what I already knew. But she didn't laugh with me. There was just silence on the other end. Cold, uncomfortable silence. She repeated it, slower this time, enunciating every word like she was talking to someone who was stupid. We got married yesterday. Small ceremony. Just immediate family. The world stopped. Everything stopped. Time stopped. My heart stopped. My breath stopped. I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't process what she was saying. All I could get out was one word. What? She explained, in the most matter-of-fact tone I've ever heard, like she was reading from a script or reciting a grocery list. They decided to have a small private ceremony with just parents and siblings. She said the event tomorrow was now just a reception. She said they wanted the actual wedding to be intimate, to be special, to be just them and their closest family. She said it was a last-minute decision, but it felt right. Every word was a knife. Every sentence was a wound. I wasn't there. I wasn't invited. I wasn't considered close enough family to be at my own grandson's wedding. I asked to speak to Tommy. I needed to hear this from him. I needed him to explain this to me. I needed to know if this was true or if this was some kind of sick joke. My voice was breaking. I could hear myself falling apart.
She said he was busy. Just he's busy. I asked again, begging now, please, please let me talk to him. She said he'd call me back when he had time. When he had time. Like talking to his grandmother about getting married without her was something he'd get around to eventually if he remembered. Then she hung up. Just hung up. No goodbye, no apology, no acknowledgement of what she'd just done to me. Just click, and the line was dead. I sat in my rocking chair, the one my husband built for me 40 years ago, back when we were young and in love and had our whole lives ahead of us. I stared at nothing. My mind couldn't grasp it, couldn't understand it, couldn't accept what I'd just been told. My grandson got married and didn't tell me, didn't invite me, didn't think I deserved to be there, didn't think I was important enough to witness one of the most important moments of his life. I wasn't there when he said his vows. I wasn't there to see him in his suit, all grown up, becoming a husband. I wasn't there to see him promise to love Vanessa forever. I wasn't there to cry tears of joy or hug him afterward and tell him how proud I was. I wasn't there for any of it. Vanessa's parents were there. Her siblings were there. Michael and Jennifer were there. But not me. Not the woman who raised him when his parents were working. Not the woman who fed him and changed him and taught him to walk. Not the woman who picked him up from school every day for years. Not the woman who helped with homework and went to every school event. Not the woman who loved him more than anything in this world. Not his nanny. I cried that night harder than I'd cried since my husband died. Harder than I cried when my mother died. Harder than I'd ever cried in my entire 71 years of life. Big, ugly, body-shaking sobs. The kind of crying that comes from deep in your soul where the real pain lives. The kind of crying that physically hurts, that makes your chest ache and your head pound. I cried for the little boy who used to hold my hand. I cried for the teenager who trusted me with his secrets. I cried for the relationship we used to have that was now dead and buried. And I cried because I knew deep down in my bones that things would never be the same. That I'd lost him. That he was gone. That the grandson I knew and loved didn't exist anymore, replaced by this stranger who could hurt me so deeply and not even care. I cried until I couldn't cry anymore, until there were no tears left, until I was just sitting there dry heaving and gasping for air. I cried until the sun came up, watching the darkness turn to light, feeling like I was dying inside.
Tommy called me the next morning, early, around 7. I had moved from my rocking chair. I'd been sitting there all night, watching the hours pass, feeling numb and empty and destroyed. When my phone rang and I saw his name, I almost didn't answer. What was there to say? What could he possibly say that would make this okay? But I answered, because despite everything, he was still my grandson. I was still his nanny. And some part of me, some stupid, hopeful part, thought maybe he'd apologize, maybe he'd explain, maybe he'd make me understand. He started with, "Nanny, I'm so sorry," but then immediately launched into excuses. "It all happened so fast," he said. "Vanessa really wanted it to be just immediate family," he said. "They didn't think it was a big deal because the reception was still happening," he said. "Vanessa's mom suggested it would be less stressful this way," he said. "Things got hectic and they forgot to call me beforehand," he said. Forgot. They forgot
forgot to tell me about one of the most important days of his life. Forgot, like I was some minor detail that slipped through the cracks, like I was unimportant, like I was nothing. Every excuse made it worse. Every word he said dug the knife deeper, because none of it was about how I felt. None of it was a real apology. It was all justification, all reasons why what he did was actually okay and I should understand. I asked him how he could do this to me. My voice was hoarse from crying all night. I asked him how he could get married without me there, how he could let Vanessa and her mother decide that I wasn't important enough to be included, how he could forget about me so easily, how he could hurt me like this. He got quiet for a moment. I could hear him breathing on the other end. Then he said something that shattered what was left of my heart into pieces so small they could never be put back together again. He said Vanessa's mom thought it might be easier if it was just immediate family because I was getting older and might not be able to handle a long ceremony, might not be able to sit through it, might get tired or confused or sick, might be too much for me. I felt like I'd been slapped, might not be able to handle it, like I was some fragile old woman on the verge of death who couldn't sit through her own wedding ceremony. I'm 71 years old. Yes, I'm old. My body doesn't work like it used to. My knees hurt when I walk too much. My hands shake sometimes. My memory isn't as sharp as it once was. But I'm still here. I'm still alive. I'm still me. And I could have sat through my grandson's wedding just fine. But that wasn't the real reason, and we both knew it. The real reason was that Vanessa and her mother didn't want me there. The real reason was that I didn't fit into their perfect, expensive, fancy wedding. I was too poor, too simple, too ordinary. I didn't belong in their world, and they made sure Tommy knew it. I asked Tommy why he let them make that decision for him, why he didn't stand up for me, why he didn't insist that I be there, why he didn't fight for me the way I'd fought for him his entire life. My voice was shaking. I was so hurt and so angry and so devastated. He said I was being unfair. His voice got hard, defensive. He said I was making it about me when it was his and Vanessa's day. He said I needed to respect their choices and be happy for them. He said they were adults and could make their own decisions. He said I was being dramatic and unreasonable. Dramatic, unreasonable, for being hurt that I wasn't invited to my own grandson's wedding? Be happy for them. How was I supposed to be happy when I'd been excluded from one of the most important moments of his life? How was I supposed to respect a choice that erased me completely? How was I supposed to smile and pretend everything was fine when my heart was breaking? I tried to make him understand. I tried to explain that this wasn't about control or making it about me. This was about love, about family, about the bond we used to have. I told him I was feeling like I was losing him, that I'd been feeling like I was losing him for months, that Vanessa had come into his life and slowly pushed me out, and he'd let her. He got defensive again. He said Vanessa hadn't pushed anyone out. He said I was jealous. Jealous of what? Of a woman who treated me like garbage? Of a woman who convinced my grandson I wasn't worth including in his wedding? He said I needed to accept that things were different now, that he had a wife and a new family, that I couldn't expect things to stay the same forever, that I needed to let him live his own life. Let him live his own life? Like loving him and wanting to be a part of his life was holding him back. Like I was some controlling grandmother who couldn't let go. I'd given him space. I'd backed off. I tried so hard not to be clingy or demanding, and this was what I got for it? The conversation ended badly. We were both upset. He said he had to go. He said they had to get ready for the reception. He said he'd see me there. Then he hung up. Didn't wait for me to respond. Just hung up. I sat there holding my phone, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my entire life. More alone than when my husband died. More alone than all those years raising 4 kids by myself. More alone than I thought it was possible to feel. The reception happened that evening. I almost didn't go. I seriously considered just staying home, not showing up, letting them wonder where I was. Maybe then Tommy would realize what he'd done. Maybe then he'd understand how much he'd hurt me. But I knew if I didn't go, it would make things even worse. It would give Vanessa ammunition. She'd tell everyone I was difficult, that I couldn't be happy for them, that I was making their wedding about me. So I got dressed. I put on that navy blue dress I'd bought specifically for this day. I did my makeup even though my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the mascara wand. I put on jewelry, simple pieces that had belonged to my mother. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back at me. She looked old, tired, broken.
I drove to the venue even though every part of me wanted to turn around and go home. The country club was about 30 minutes away in the fancy part of town where people like me didn't belong. I got lost twice trying to find it, my GPS taking me in circles through neighborhoods with houses that probably cost more than I'd make in 10 lifetimes. When I finally found it and pulled into the parking lot, I just sat in my car for a while, watching other people arrive, watching them laugh and chat as they walked toward the entrance. Everyone looked so happy, so excited. Nobody looked like their heart had been ripped out and stomped on. I finally forced myself to get out of the car and walk toward the entrance. My knees hurt with every step, but I kept going. I walked through the doors into this beautiful venue with marble floors and crystal chandeliers and flowers everywhere. So many flowers. White roses and peonies, just like Vanessa's aunt had said. The smell was overwhelming. There were people everywhere, dressed in expensive clothes, holding glasses of champagne, laughing and chatting like they'd all known each other forever. I stood near the entrance, not sure where to go or what to do. I didn't recognize anyone except Michael and Jennifer, and they were across the room talking to Vanessa's parents. I felt completely out of place, like I was an intruder at someone else's party, like I didn't belong there at all. Tommy saw me and came over. He was wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He looked handsome, grown up, like a man, not the little boy I remembered. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He gave me a hug, but it felt forced, obligatory, like hugging an old aunt you see once a year at family reunions out of politeness, not love. He asked how I was doing. I said I was fine, even though I wasn't, even though I was dying inside. What else was I supposed to say? That I felt like my heart had been ripped out and stomped on? That I'd cried all night? That I felt betrayed and hurt and abandoned? I couldn't say any of that. Not here. Not now. He introduced me to some of Vanessa's relatives.
cousins and aunts and uncles whose names I immediately forgot. They were polite, but not warm. They shook my hand and said, "Nice to meet you," and asked generic questions like where I lived and how long I'd lived there. Then they found excuses to walk away, to get drinks, to say hi to someone else, to check on something, anything to end the conversation. I found a table near the back and sat down. My assigned seat, table 12. Far from the head table where Tommy and Vanessa sat, far from the family tables where Michael and Jennifer sat with Tommy's siblings and Vanessa's immediate family. Table 12 with people I didn't know, people who had some distant connection to Vanessa, people who kept looking at me with confusion, probably wondering who I was and why I was sitting with them. I watched as everyone celebrated a wedding I wasn't invited to. I watched Tommy and Vanessa make their entrance, announced as Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. Everyone cheered and clapped. I clapped too, my hands moving mechanically. I watched them have their first dance to some song I didn't know. Watch them cut the cake, watch them go from table to table thanking people for coming. They didn't come to my table. They went to every other table, but not mine. I watched them skip right over us. Maybe they forgot. Maybe it was intentional. I don't know. Either way, it hurt. At one point, Vanessa's mother gave a speech. She stood up with her champagne glass, tapping it with a fork to get everyone's attention. She talked about how proud she was of Vanessa, about how she watched her grow into this beautiful, accomplished woman, about how she'd helped plan every detail of this perfect day, about the private ceremony yesterday was so beautiful and intimate and everything they dreamed of. Every word felt like a slap. She talked about the ceremony like it was this wonderful thing, this special moment, the moment I wasn't allowed to be part of. She talked about helping plan everything like she was the only important mother figure in Tommy's life now, like I didn't exist. People at my table started asking me questions. How do you know the couple? I said I was Tommy's grandmother. Their eyebrows went up. His grandmother? Yes. They glanced at each other. One woman, maybe 50 years old, with perfectly styled hair and expensive jewelry, leaned in and asked in a low voice if I'd been at the ceremony. I had to say no. Had to admit out loud to these strangers that I wasn't invited to my own grandson's wedding. The look on their faces said everything. Pity, shock, awkwardness. They quickly changed the subject, talking about the food and the venue and how beautiful everything was, but I could feel them looking at me throughout the rest of the evening, whispering to each other, probably talking about the sad old grandmother who got left out. I couldn't take it anymore. Couldn't take watching my grandson treat me like a stranger. Couldn't take feeling invisible in a room full of people celebrating him. Couldn't take the pain of being there, but not really being there at all. Couldn't take another minute of this torture. I left early, quietly. I didn't say goodbye to anyone, just stood up, grabbed my purse, and walked out. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. I could have disappeared and it wouldn't have mattered to anyone. I drove home slowly, my vision blurry from tears I was trying to hold back. When I got home, I took off that dress and hung it back in the closet. I'd never wear it again. It would just hang there forever, a reminder of the worst day I'd had in years, a reminder of how little I mattered to the person I loved most in the world. Tommy texted me later that night, around 11. "Hey, Nanny, I saw you left early. Is everything okay?" I stared at that text for a long time, maybe an hour. I wanted to tell him exactly how I felt. I wanted to unleash all the hurt and anger and betrayal. I wanted to make him understand what he had done to me. I wanted him to feel even a fraction of the pain I was feeling. But I didn't. I just wrote back. I wasn't feeling well, needed to go home. A lie, but easier than the truth. He responded quickly. "Oh, okay. Feel better. Love you." Love you. Those words that used to mean everything now meant nothing. They were just words, automatic, something you say because you're supposed to, not because you feel it. I didn't respond. Just turned off my phone and went to bed. Lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life had gotten to this point, wondering where I went wrong, wondering if I'd ever matter to Tommy a Ben. It's been almost 4 months now since the wedding. 4 months of barely speaking to my grandson, 4 months of feeling like a stranger in his life, 4 months of carrying this pain with me every single day. Tommy calls maybe once a month if I'm lucky, always with Vanessa in the background. I can hear her voice, hear her telling him things, hear her presence in every conversation. The calls are surface level and meaningless. "How are you? I'm good. How's the weather? It's fine. How's your health? It's okay." Nothing real. Nothing like we used to have.
I remember him looking up at me with tears streaming down his face and saying, "You're my favorite person in the whole world, Nanny. You always make everything better." I held him tighter and told him I'd always be there for him, always, no matter what. That memory haunts me now because I kept my promise. I was always there for him. But he's not there for me. He broke his promise. Or maybe he never made one. Maybe I just assumed that the love I gave him would be returned. Maybe that was my mistake. I look at these photos and I don't even recognize that little boy anymore. That sweet child who loved me unconditionally. That teenager who trusted me with everything. That young man who called me twice a week just to talk. He's gone. Replaced by someone I don't know. Someone who can hurt me and not care. Someone who chose a woman and her family over me. Someone who got married without me and thought it was okay. The worst days are the Tuesdays and Saturdays. Those days when he used to call me. I still wake up on Tuesday mornings expecting my phone to ring. I make my tea and sit in my chair and wait. The phone doesn't ring. It never rings anymore. But I still wait. Like some part of me thinks maybe this Tuesday will be different. Maybe this Tuesday he'll remember. Maybe this Tuesday he'll call and we'll talk for an hour like we used to, and everything will be okay again.
but it never happens. And every Tuesday that passes without his call is another reminder that I've lost him. Saturdays are worse somehow. Saturday was always my favorite day for his calls because we had more time. We could talk longer. He didn't have to rush off to class or anything else. We'd just talk about everything and nothing. Those conversations were the highlight of my week, the thing I looked forward to most. Now, Saturdays are just empty. I sit in my house alone with nothing to look forward to. I try to fill the time. I garden, I clean, I bake, I watch TV. But nothing fills the hole that Tommy left. Nothing makes the emptiness go away. I've started talking to him anyway. I know it's silly. I know he can't hear me, but I do it anyway. I tell him about my day, about the flowers that are blooming in my garden, about the new recipe I tried, about what's happening in the neighborhood. I pretend he's listening. Pretend he cares. It's pathetic, but it's all I have. Sometimes I drive by his old elementary school, park across the street, and just sit there. Remember walking him to his classroom on his first day of kindergarten? How scared he was, how he held my hand so tight, how he begged me not to leave. I stayed with him until he felt safe, stayed until he let go of my hand and went to play with the other kids. I cried in my car that day, not because I was sad, but because I was so proud of him, so proud of my little brave boy. Now I cry in my car for different reasons.
I drive by the park where we used to go every weekend, the playground where I pushed him on the swings, where I caught him at the bottom of the slide, where we'd have picnics on the grass and feed the ducks in the pond. I sit in my car and watch other grandparents with their grandchildren, watch them push kids on swings and help them across monkey bars, watch them smile and laugh and be part of their grandchildren's lives. I wonder if those grandparents know how lucky they are. I wonder if they take it for granted. I wonder if they know that it can all disappear, that the child who loves you today might not love you tomorrow, that the relationship you think is unbreakable can shatter in an instant. I've gotten angry, really angry. There have been days where I'm so furious I can't see straight. I think about all the sacrifices I made for Tommy, all the times I put his needs before my own, all the love and time and energy I poured into that boy. I think about the nights I stayed up with him when he was sick, holding his head over the toilet when he had stomach flu, checking his temperature every hour when he had a fever, sitting by his bed reading to him when he couldn't sleep. I did that. Not Vanessa, not Vanessa's mother, me. I think about the money I spent on him over the years, money I didn't really have, buying him school supplies and clothes and toys, taking him to movies and museums and the zoo, buying him birthday presents and Christmas presents, even when I had to skip buying things for myself. I wore the same coat for 10 years because I spent my extra money on him. I ate cheap food so I could buy him treats. I sacrificed constantly and never complained because I loved him. I think about all the times I was there for him when he needed someone, when his parents were fighting and he needed a safe place to go, when he failed a test and was scared to tell his parents, when he got in trouble at school and needed someone to talk to who wouldn't judge him. I was that person. Always. I never turned him away. Never made him feel like he was bothering me. Never made him feel like anything other than the most important person in my life. And for what? So he could grow up and forget about me? So he could let some woman and her family decide I wasn't important? So he could get married without me and act like it was no big deal? The anger feels good sometimes, better than the sadness. When I'm angry, I feel powerful instead of weak. I feel justified instead of pathetic. I imagine confronting him, really confronting him. Not the careful, gentle way I tried before, but actually telling him exactly what he did to me, how much he hurt me, how betrayed I feel, how I gave him everything and he gave me nothing in return. But then the anger fades and I'm just sad again. Because anger doesn't change anything. It doesn't bring him back. It doesn't fix what's broken. It just makes me feel bitter, and that's not who I want to be. Other days I feel nothing at all. Just numb. Those might be the worst days, because at least anger and sadness mean I'm still feeling something. Numbness means I'm giving up, means I'm accepting that this is just how things are now, that this is my life now, alone, forgotten, unimportant. On those days, I go through the motions. I wake up, I get dressed, I eat, I do whatever needs to be done, but I'm not really there. I'm just existing, waiting for the day to end so I can go to bed and not feel anything. I've thought about reaching out to him, writing him a letter, maybe, explaining everything, how I feel, what his wedding meant to me, what being excluded did to me, how much I miss him, how much I love him still, despite everything, how I don't understand what happened between us, how I want to fix it but don't know how. I've actually written the letter several times, different versions, some angry, some sad, some pleading. I write them, and then I read them, and they all sound desperate, pathetic, like an old woman begging for scraps of attention from someone who doesn't want to give them.
So I never send them. I just keep them in a drawer. Pages and pages of words he'll never read. Feelings he'll never know about. Pain he'll never understand. I've also thought about just letting go completely, accepting that he's gone and moving on with whatever time I have left. 71 years old. My own mother died at 75. My husband died at 58. I could have 20 more years. Or I could have 2. Nobody knows. Whatever time I have left, do I want to spend it mourning someone who doesn't care about me? Do I want to spend it hoping for phone calls that never come and visits that never happen? Do I want to waste what's left of my life on someone who's already moved on? The logical answer is no. I should let go. I should focus on the family members who do care about me, my other grandchildren, my children, my friends. I should fill my life with people who want me in theirs. But I can't. I can't let go of Tommy because he's not just my grandson, he's part of me. He's woven into every fiber of my being. 24 years of loving him. 24 years of being his nanny. You can't just turn that off. You can't just
decide to stop loving someone because they hurt you. I still love him. I always will. He's my grandson. He's the little boy who used to climb into my lap and fall asleep. He's the child who made me feel needed and important. He's the young man who used to call me his favorite person. That person still exists somewhere inside him, maybe buried under layers of Vanessa's influence and her family's expectations, but he's still there. My Tommy is still there. And that's why I can't give up. Because some part of me still hopes he'll come back, that he'll realize what he's done, that he'll miss me the way I miss him, that he'll call me one day and say, "Nanny, I'm sorry, I messed up. Can we fix this?" That we'll rebuild what we had, that I'll matter to him again. I know it's probably not going to happen. I know I'm probably fooling myself. But hope is all I have left. Hope that someday things will change, that someday he'll understand what he threw away, that someday I'll be his nanny again instead of just some old woman he's obligated to call once a month. Michael has tried to talk to him. He told me that a few weeks ago. He said he sat Tommy down and told him he needed to make more of an effort with me, that what he did with the wedding was wrong, that I was hurt and he needed to fix it. Tommy apparently got defensive, said everyone was being too sensitive, said it was his wedding and he could do what he wanted, said I needed to get over it. Get over it. Like having my heart broken is something I should just get over. Michael said he tried to make Tommy understand, but Tommy wouldn't listen. Just kept making excuses, kept blaming everyone else, kept acting like he didn't do anything wrong. Michael said he was sorry, said he didn't know what else to do, said Tommy was an adult and he couldn't force him to do anything. I told Michael it was okay, that I appreciated him trying, that it wasn't his fault his son turned into someone we barely recognize. But inside, I was devastated, because if Tommy won't listen to his own father, he's certainly not going to listen to me. Jennifer suggested a family dinner. Get everyone together, try to have a conversation in a neutral setting. She said maybe if Tommy saw how much this was affecting everyone, not just me, he'd understand. She said maybe we could work through this as a family. I said no. I couldn't sit through a dinner with Tommy and Vanessa. Couldn't pretend everything was fine. Couldn't make small talk while my heart was breaking. Couldn't watch him be affectionate with her while being cold to me. I just couldn't do it. Jennifer understood. She said whenever I was ready, the offer stood. But I don't think I'll ever be ready.
I've started going to church more. I'm not particularly religious, never have been. But there's something comforting about sitting in those pews, listening to the hymns, being surrounded by people, even if I don't talk to them, even if I don't know them. It's better than sitting home alone. The pastor talks about forgiveness, about letting go of hurt, about trusting God's plan. I try to listen, try to find comfort in the words, but mostly I just sit there and think about Tommy. Wonder if God's plan includes me being miserable for the rest of my life. Wonder why God would let this happen. Wonder what I did to deserve this. I'm not angry at God. I'm just confused. I tried to be a good person, tried to do the right things, raised my children the best I could, loved my grandchildren with everything I had, helped people when I could, never intentionally hurt anyone. But here I am, 71 years old, alone, heartbroken, forgotten by the person I loved most. What was it all for? All the sacrifices, all the hard work, all the love I gave? What was it for if it ends like this? I've thought about my husband a lot lately, wondered what he'd say about all this. He was always so good at knowing the right thing to do, always calm and wise. I miss him more now than I have in years. Miss having someone to talk to about this, someone who'd understand, someone who'd hold me and tell me it was going to be okay, even if it wasn't. He would have loved Tommy, would have been so proud of the man he became, or the man he was before Vanessa came along. Would have loved taking him fishing and teaching him to fix cars and all the grandfather things he never got to do because he died too young. I wonder if things would be different if my husband was still alive, if Tommy would treat me differently, if he'd think twice about excluding me because he'd know his grandfather would be disappointed in him, if having a grandfather figure would have given him a stronger sense of family loyalty. But my husband isn't here, and I'm dealing with this alone, like I've dealt with everything else in my life. Alone. I've started writing things down. Not letters to Tommy, just memories, things I don't want to forget, stories about Tommy growing up that I want to preserve somehow. Maybe someday he'll want to know these stories. Maybe someday he'll have children and want to tell them about when he was young. Maybe someday these memories will matter to him. Or maybe not. Maybe they'll just sit in a notebook that nobody ever reads. My memories, my love, my pain. All documented, all meaningless. I wrote about the time he was 7 and decided he wanted to learn to bake, how we made cookies every weekend for months, how he'd stand on a stool at my counter carefully measuring ingredients, how serious he'd get about following the recipe, how proud he was when the cookies turned out perfect. He'd pack them up in little baggies and give them to his teachers and friends. Everyone said they were the best cookies they had ever had. He'd beam with pride and tell them, "My Nanny taught me." I wrote about the time he was 10 and broke his arm falling off his bike, how scared he was at the hospital, how he wouldn't let anyone but me hold his hand while they set the bone, how he cried but tried to be brave, how I stayed with him all night even though the nurses said I could go home, how he woke up in the middle of the night and panicked until he saw me sitting in the chair next to his bed, how he whispered, "I knew you'd be here, Nanny." I wrote about the time he was 15 and got in trouble at school for cheating on a test, how disappointed his parents were, how ashamed he was, how he came to my house and confessed everything, how I listened without judgment and then talked to him about integrity and mistakes and learning from them, how he cried and said he didn't know why he did it, how I hugged him and told him everyone makes mistakes, but what matters is what you do after, how he thanked me for not making him feel like a terrible person. All these memories, all these moments that shaped who he became, or who I thought he became. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I didn't know him as well as I thought I did. Maybe the person I loved wasn't real. Maybe I just saw what I wanted to see. But these memories are real to me. They matter to me, even if they don't matter to him anymore. I've been having trouble sleeping. I lie awake at night, replaying everything, trying to figure out where it went wrong. Was it something I said? Something I did? Did I love him too much? Not enough? Was I too involved in his life? Not involved enough? Did I overstep somehow without realizing it? I've analyzed every interaction with Vanessa, every conversation, every moment, trying to figure out what I did to make her dislike me so much, because she clearly does. You don't exclude someone from a wedding unless you have a problem with them. You don't convince your fiancé to get married without his grandmother unless you want to hurt that grandmother. But I can't figure it out. I was nice to her. I tried to be welcoming. I never criticized her or said anything negative. I gave them space. I didn't interfere. I didn't try to control anything. So what did I do wrong? Maybe it's not about what I did. Maybe it's about what I am. An old woman from a poor background. Someone who doesn't fit into their fancy world. Someone who's an embarrassment. Someone they'd rather hide away than have around. That hurts worse somehow. Being rejected not for something I did, but for who I am. For being poor. For being old. For being ordinary. Things I can't change. Things I shouldn't have to apologize for. I raised 4 children on my own after my husband died. I worked 2 jobs. I kept my family together. I gave those children values and love and everything I could give them. I helped raise my grandchildren. I was there for everyone who needed me. I did the best I could with what I had. And apparently that's not good enough for Vanessa and her family. Apparently that makes me unworthy of being at my own grandson's wedding. The unfairness of it all makes me want to scream sometimes. I've lived 71 years, survived so much, worked so hard, loved so deeply. And this is what I get? This is how my story goes? Forgotten and discarded by someone I love? I don't know what the future holds anymore. I used to think I'd grow old surrounded by family, by grandchildren and great-grandchildren who loved me. I'd imagine Tommy bringing his kids to visit me, imagined teaching them to bake cookies like I taught him, imagined being Nanny to another generation, imagined being important and loved and needed. Now I don't know. Maybe Tommy will have children and I'll be kept away from them too. Maybe Vanessa will make sure her children don't know me. Maybe I'll die alone in this house with nobody there, nobody to hold my hand, nobody to say goodbye to, just alone, like I've been for so long. That's a terrifying thought, dying alone. But it's a real possibility now, more real than I want to admit. Or maybe things will change. Maybe Tommy will have children and it'll wake something up in him. Maybe he'll remember what I meant to him. Maybe he'll want his children to know their great-grandmother. Maybe becoming a parent himself will make him understand what he did to me. But I can't count on that. I can't spend whatever time I have left waiting for something that might never happen. I have to find a way to live with this, to accept it, to move forward somehow. I just don't know how. I look at other grandmothers sometimes, at the grocery store or the park or church. I watch them with their grandchildren. I see the love in their eyes, the joy, the connection, and I feel this overwhelming sadness because I had that once.
I had that with Tommy, and I lost it, and I don't know if I'll ever get it back. Some days I'm okay. I go through my day and don't think about it too much. I focus on other things. My garden, my other grandchildren, my friends. I find moments of peace, moments where the pain isn't so sharp. But then something will remind me. A Tuesday morning, a little boy at the store who looks like Tommy did at that age, a mother and son walking together holding hands, something small, and it all comes crashing back. The pain, the loss, the emptiness, and I'm right back where I started, sitting in my rocking chair, crying for something I can't get back, mourning a relationship that's dead, wishing things were different, wishing I mattered, wishing my grandson loved me the way I love him.
This is my life now. This is what I wake up to every day. This pain, this loss, this emptiness. And I have to find a way to live with it because what choice do I have? I can't force Tommy to love me. Can't force him to include me in his life. Can't force him to see what he's done. Can't force him to care. All I can do is keep living. Keep getting up every morning. Keep going through the motions. Keep hoping that maybe someday things will change, even though I know they probably won't. So yeah, that's my story. That's what happened when I asked when the wedding was, and my daughter-in-law said they got married yesterday. That's what it feels like to be erased from your grandchild's life by someone who doesn't think you matter. That's what it feels like to love someone more than anything and have them treat you like you're nothing. That's what it feels like to spend 24 years being someone's nanny, only to be forgotten when you're no longer useful. If you've ever felt invisible to someone you love, you're not alone. If you've ever been excluded from something important by someone you'd give your life for, I see you. I understand your pain because I'm living it too. And if you're a grandparent dealing with a grandchild who's pulling away, who's being influenced by someone who wants to push you out, I understand. It's the hardest thing in the world. Harder than losing my husband. Harder than raising 4 kids alone. Harder than any physical pain I've ever experienced. Because at least when my husband died, I knew he loved me. I knew I mattered to him. I knew I was important in his life, right up until the end. With Tommy, I don't know anymore. And not knowing if he still matters to me, not knowing if he ever thinks about me or misses me or regrets what he did, that's what kills me every single day. I'm 71 years old. I don't know how much time I have left. But however long it is, I'll spend it carrying this pain, carrying these memories, carrying this love for someone who doesn't love me back the same way. And maybe that's my burden to bear. Maybe that's just what happens when you love someone too much. They have the power to destroy you. And sometimes they do.